Talvo 7 was a moon nobody wanted and everybody needed, which made it the perfect place to die. Sergeant Marcus Webb crouched behind what used to be a defensive bunker and was now just expensive rubble, trying to calculate how many seconds he had before the krill overran their position. His tactical display was screaming warnings in 3 languages, none of them encouraging. "Webb, we need to fall back." Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled through the comm, barely audible over the sound of plasma fire and chittering that made Marcus's spine crawl. The krill didn't roar or scream when they attacked. They chittered like insects, millions of legs and mandibles clicking in horrible coordination. "Fall back to where?" Marcus shouted, snapping off shots at the advancing swarm. "The extraction point is compromised. The western corridor is collapsed, and the Valorians are getting hammered on the ridge." The human contingent on Talvo 7 numbered exactly 40 soldiers, sent as a gesture of Earth's commitment to the alliance with the Valorian Empire. 40 humans supporting 10,000 Valorian regulars in defending mining operations that fueled half the sector's economy. It should have been a milk run, a way for Earth to show it could contribute to galactic defense without risking much. Then the krill had arrived in numbers nobody predicted, and the milk run turned into a slaughterhouse. Marcus checked his ammunition counter and swore. 15 shots left, and the krill were still coming. They moved like liquid death, 6-legged insected nightmares with crystalline carapaces that reflected weapon fire and mandibles that could shear through battle armor. The Valorians fought with disciplined precision, their energy weapons carving through krill warriors, but for every one they dropped, 3 more emerged from the tunnels. "Extraction in 5 minutes. Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "All human forces converge on LZ Alpha." Marcus started to move, then froze. 30 meters to his left, one of the Valorian Crimson Guard, the elite warriors who served the Empress directly, was pinned under a collapsed support beam. Krill warriors were closing in, and the Valorian was struggling to free herself, her armor's power assist clearly damaged. Every tactical instinct Marcus possessed screamed at him to run. He was a sergeant in Earth's expeditionary forces, not a hero. His job was to follow orders, support the Valorians, and survive to file reports nobody would read. But the Crimson Guard warrior looked up, and through her helmet's visor Marcus saw her eyes, wide with the knowledge of incoming death, and his body moved before his brain caught up. "Webb, what are you doing?" Chen screamed through the comm. "Something stupid," Marcus replied, sprinting toward the pinned warrior. He dropped his rifle, grabbed the support beam with both hands, and pulled with everything he had. Enhanced combat armor added to his strength, but the beam was massive and his boots skidded on blood-slicked stone. The Crimson Guard, her nameplate read Kess, stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Human, leave. This is not your. Shut up and move when I lift." The krill were 10 meters away. Then 5. Marcus could smell them now, that horrible organic mechanical scent that made his hindbrain scream about wrongness. He pulled harder, muscles screaming, and the beam shifted. Kess dragged herself free just as the first krill warrior reached them. Marcus managed to draw his sidearm and put 3 rounds through its head before the second one hit him like a freight train. He went down hard, armor sparking, and felt the impact of something punching through his torso with clinical precision. Pain came second, delayed by shock and adrenaline. Marcus looked down and saw the krill blade, some kind of crystalline spike extending from its forelimb, buried in his abdomen. It had punched clean through, missing his spine by centimeters but causing catastrophic damage to everything else. The krill warrior pulled the blade free, and Marcus felt the wet heat of blood flooding his armor. His vision grayed at the edges. Kess was back on her feet, her sidearm firing with precision that dropped the krill warrior before it could finish him. More Crimson Guard appeared, covering fire driving back the swarm. Strong hands grabbed Marcus, and he heard Kess shouting something in Valorian that his struggling translator rendered as urgent medical emergency. The world tilted as they dragged him toward the extraction point. Marcus tried to assess his injury through the haze of shock, but his hands couldn't find the edges of the wound through all the blood. That was bad. That was really bad. Extraction ships screamed overhead, their defensive cannons turning the battlefield into a strobing nightmare. Marcus was vaguely aware of being carried up a ramp, of medics descending on him with equipment that beeped in alarm, of Kes refusing to leave his side despite orders to clear the medical bay. Then she appeared. Through the chaos and the pain and the gray fog threatening to pull him under, Marcus saw her. Empress Shade Valkyris, absolute ruler of the Valorian Empire, descended from her command ship to personally assess casualties. She was impossible to miss. 7 feet of armored grace, with those distinctive elongated ears that marked all Valorians, wearing ceremonial battle armor that probably cost more than Earth's entire defense budget. She moved through the medical bay with purpose, checking on her wounded, and Marcus thought distantly that it was strange for a monarch to care that much. Then she reached his position, and Kes immediately knelt in formal respect. "Majesty, this human saved my life," Kes said quickly. "He's badly wounded, the medics say." Shade knelt beside Marcus, and her silver eyes locked onto the wound in his torso. The medical team had cut away his armor and uniform, exposing the injury, and Marcus knew from their expressions it was bad. But Shade's reaction wasn't concern or sympathy. Her eyes widened with something that looked like shock, then disbelief. She reached out slowly, her hand hovering over the wound without touching, and when she spoke, her voice carried an edge of something Marcus couldn't identify. "This wound should be fatal." "It still might be, Majesty," one of the medics said nervously. "We're preparing emergency surgery." "No," Shade's voice cut through the medical bay like a blade. "Look at it. Actually look." The medics clustered closer, and Marcus heard their collective intake of breath. Through the pain fog, he tried to understand what they were seeing. "The bleeding has slowed," one whispered, "but he has no regeneration implants. No nanite support. Human biology doesn't." "I know what human biology should do," Shade said quietly, her silver eyes still locked on Marcus's wound. "And this isn't it." Marcus tried to speak, but his voice came out as a rasp. "Ma'am, I don't understand." Shade finally looked at his face, and her expression was unreadable. "Neither do I, Sergeant, but you're not dying. Against every law of biology and medicine, you're not dying." She stood, addressing the medics with absolute authority. "Full medical scan, genetic workup, deep tissue analysis. I want to know everything about this human's biology. And I want Elder Vorn here immediately." "Majesty, we're in the middle of an evacuation." "Now." The medics scattered. Kes remained kneeling, looking between Marcus and her Empress with obvious confusion. Shade's hand rested briefly on the Crimson Guard's shoulder. "You were saved by something impossible, Kes, and I need to understand what." Marcus wanted to ask what she meant, wanted to understand why everyone was looking at him like he'd done something beyond just being stupidly heroic. But the pain was winning its war against his consciousness, and the gray fog was back with reinforcements. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Empress Shade Valkyris staring at his wound, with an expression that managed to combine awe and fear in equal measure. And he thought, distantly, that being impossible was probably not a great thing to be when you were bleeding out in an alien medical bay light years from home. Then thinking became too difficult, and Marcus Webb let the darkness take him, unaware that he'd just become the most important human in the galaxy. Marcus woke to the surprising realization that he wasn't dead, which immediately made him suspicious because he definitely felt dying happen. The medical bay ceiling above him was smooth crystalline material that pulsed with soft bioluminescence, definitely not standard Earth medical equipment. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through his torso. "Don't move." The voice was firm but not unkind. Marcus turned his head carefully and found a Valorian in medical robes standing beside his bed. The alien's elongated ears were decorated with what looked like rank insignia, and his expression suggested he'd been watching Marcus sleep for uncomfortable amounts of time. "How long was I out?" Marcus managed, his throat raw. 47 hours. You should have been dead in 47 minutes. The Valorian's silver eyes studied him with clinical intensity. "I am Elder Vorn, Chief Medical Advisor to Her Majesty. And you, Sergeant Webb, are a medical impossibility." "Yeah, I'm getting that impression." Marcus looked down at his torso. The area where the krill blade had punched through was covered with a transparent medical film, and beneath it he could see, "That's not right." "No," Vorn agreed, "it's not." The wound was healing. Not the slow, careful healing humans did with stitches and time, but active, visible regeneration. Marcus could actually see new tissue forming at the wound's edges, cells knitting together in patterns that shouldn't happen without advanced medical intervention. "We removed the field dressing 12 hours ago," Vorn continued, pulling up holographic displays that showed Marcus's injury from multiple angles. The damage was catastrophic. Perforated intestine, lacerated liver, severe muscle trauma, significant blood loss. You should have required immediate surgery, tissue regeneration therapy, and weeks of recovery. He gestured at the displays. "Instead, your body initiated regenerative protocols we've never seen in baseline human physiology. Your cellular repair rate is operating at approximately 400% normal human baseline." Marcus stared at the medical data, trying to make sense of numbers that didn't make sense. "I don't have regeneration implants. Earth doesn't have that technology." "We know, we scanned you extensively. No implants, no nanites, no external enhancement of any kind." Vorn's hands moved through the holographic display, pulling up genetic sequencing that looked like abstract art. "But you do have something else. Genetic markers we've never encountered in humans. Markers that match something from Valorian historical archives." The door to the medical bay opened. An Empress Shade entered with an entourage of guards and advisors. She moved with the kind of presence that made everyone in the room unconsciously straighten, and Marcus tried to sit up properly despite the pain. "Stay down, Sergeant," Shade ordered, waving away protocol. "Vorn, show him." The Elder manipulated the holographic display, and Marcus found himself looking at two genetic sequences side by side. One was labeled Human Sergeant Marcus Webb. The other was labeled Inheritor Historical Archive. "These markers," Vorn said, highlighting sections of the sequences, "are identical, not similar. Identical. You carry genetic code that matches an ancient warrior species called the Inheritors, who vanished from galactic records 15,000 years ago." Marcus looked between the display and the assembled Valorians. "I'm going to need you to explain this like I'm 5, and also hit my head really hard." Shade pulled up a chair, which seemed wrong because she was an empress, and he was a sergeant bleeding in a medical bed. But she sat with the easy authority of someone who didn't care about appearances. The Inheritors were legendary warriors. They possessed regenerative abilities that made them nearly unkillable, wounds that should have been fatal healed in days or hours. They could survive injuries that would kill any other species. They were also terrifying, Vorn added. Valorian historical texts described them as unstoppable in combat. They called the regenerative mechanism the flame constant, a biological response that activated under mortal threat, flooding the body with factors that accelerated healing beyond normal limits. Marcus processed this information slowly. "And you think I'm descended from these inheritors? That's impossible. Humanity's evolutionary history is well documented. We evolved on Earth from Earth primates with no alien intervention." "That's what we thought too," Shade said quietly. "Until we started finding references in the oldest Valorian archives. The Inheritors didn't just disappear. According to fragmented records, they engaged in what we'd now call seeding, visiting primitive worlds and leaving genetic markers in developing species. They were preparing the galaxy for something." "For what?" We don't know. The records are incomplete, damaged by time. Shade leaned forward. But there was a prophecy, dismissed by modern Valorians as mythology. It claimed the Inheritors would return when the galaxy faced its greatest threat, wearing new faces but carrying the old blood. Marcus felt like the medical bay was tilting. You're saying humanity is full of sleeper agents. Ancient warrior genes just waiting to activate. We're saying you activated them, Vorn corrected. Under mortal threat, your body initiated the flame constant. We've been monitoring your healing for the past 2 days. It's accelerating. At current rates, you'll be combat ready in 72 hours from an injury that should have required months of recovery. That's not possible. And yet, Shade gestured at him, here you are. Kess appeared in the doorway, still in her Crimson Guard armor but with her helmet removed. She approached Marcus's bed and performed a formal Valorian bow. Sergeant Webb, I owe you my life. And apparently, I owe it to an Inheritor legacy warrior, which means I owe it even more impressively. I'm just a regular guy, Marcus protested. I'm from Cleveland. I joined the expeditionary forces because college was expensive. I'm not some ancient warrior. Your genetics disagree, Vorn said, pulling up more data. And there's something else. Since your wounding, we've been monitoring the other human soldiers in your unit. 3 of them are showing similar genetic markers, though less pronounced. The trait is present in your population, just dormant until activated by extreme stress. Shade stood, pacing the medical bay with controlled energy. This changes everything. Humanity went from being considered a support species to potentially being Inheritor descendants. Do you understand the political implications? I barely understand the biological implications, Marcus admitted. You're telling me I'm healing too fast and it's because of ancient alien DNA that shouldn't be in my genome. That's already breaking my brain. There's more, Shade said, and something in her tone made Marcus's stomach drop. The Krill have intensified their attacks since your wounding, specifically targeting human positions. Vorn believes they can sense the Inheritor genetic signature. The Krill and the Inheritors were ancient enemies, Vorn explained. Fragmentary records suggest the Krill evolved specifically to combat Inheritor warriors. They're drawn to the genetic markers like a biological imperative. Marcus felt cold despite the medical bay's controlled temperature. So by surviving, I painted a target on all of humanity. Possibly, Shade said. Or you revealed humanity's true nature at exactly the moment we needed it most. The Krill are winning this war, Sergeant. They're overwhelming every defensive line, consuming worlds faster than we can evacuate them. But if humans carry Inheritor blood, if that blood can be awakened. She didn't finish the thought. You want to weaponize us, Marcus said flatly. I want to understand what you are, Shade corrected. Because right now, you're either the salvation we've been waiting for, or the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced. The Inheritors were unstoppable warriors, yes, but they were also unpredictable, dangerous. They made entire species extinct when provoked. Marcus looked at his healing wound, at the impossible regeneration happening in real time. He thought about being from Cleveland, about joining up for college money, about being a regular guy who liked bad movies and worse coffee. I don't feel dangerous, he said quietly. Neither did the Inheritors, Vorn replied. Until they were. Shade placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder and the gesture felt personal rather than formal. Rest. Heal. We'll figure this out together. But know this, Sergeant, you've changed the course of this war. Whether for better or worse, we'll discover soon enough. After they left, Marcus lay in the medical bay staring at the holographic displays, still showing his impossible genetics. He pulled up his service record on his personal datapad and looked at his file photo. A regular guy from Cleveland with a crooked smile and no idea he was carrying ancient warrior DNA. His wound pulsed with warmth, the flame constant doing its work, and Marcus wondered what his ancestors, human or Inheritor, would think of him now. Probably that he should have left Kes pinned and saved himself the existential crisis. But then again, apparently being stupidly heroic was in his genes. Literally. Marcus was cleared for light duty after 4 days, which proved Vorn's predictions about accelerated healing and simultaneously terrified everyone involved. The wound that should have taken months to recover from was now just an angry red scar, and medical scans showed his internal organs had regenerated with efficiency that made Valorian doctors look at their equipment like it had betrayed them. "This is not light duty," Marcus said, staring at the tactical briefing Shade had summoned him to. The command center was filled with holographic displays showing krill movements across Talvo 7 and the surrounding sector. None of the displays showed anything encouraging. "You wanted to understand the situation," Shade replied. She stood at the center of the displays, manipulating data with practiced efficiency. "This is the situation. The krill have tripled their forces in this sector since your wounding. They're not just attacking, they're hunting." Vorn pulled up biological tracking data that made Marcus's stomach turn. "We've been monitoring krill movement patterns. They're specifically targeting locations with human thermal signatures. Your species emits biochemical markers they're drawn to specifically, the Inheritor genetic signature." "They can smell it," Kes added. She stood at attention near the Empress, her Crimson Guard armor still bearing scorch marks from the last battle, like predators tracking prey. "Except the krill aren't exactly predators," Marcus said, studying the tactical data. His expeditionary training was kicking in, analyzing patterns and weaknesses. "They're more like an immune response. The galaxy gets infected with something dangerous, and the krill show up to eliminate it." Shade turned to look at him, and there was approval in her silver eyes. "That's more accurate than most military analysts have managed. The Inheritors considered the krill their greatest enemy, the only species that could match them in sustained combat. Because the krill evolved specifically to kill them," Marcus finished. "Which means they see humans as the return of something they were designed to exterminate." He looked at the casualty reports, the human positions being systematically destroyed. "We need to evacuate Earth forces, get them out of the sector before." "Before what?" Shade interrupted. "Before the krill follow them home, because they will, Sergeant. If humans carry Inheritor blood, the krill won't stop until your species is extinct. Running just delays the inevitable." Marcus wanted to argue, but tactical reality wouldn't let him. "So what's the alternative?" "We stay and fight a war we're not equipped for." "We test a theory," Vorn said, pulling up genetic data. "Your Inheritor markers activated under mortal threat. The flame constant responds to extreme stress, combat pressure, the biological certainty of death. What if other humans can be triggered the same way?" "You want to use humans as bait," Marcus said flatly. "I want to see if your species can become what the prophecy claimed," Shade corrected. "The Inheritors returning when the galaxy needs them most. The question is whether that's mythology or biological reality." Marcus thought about the 40 humans in his unit, good soldiers who'd signed up for support duty, not to become ancient warrior guinea pigs. "And if they can't activate, if the genes are there but dormant, then we evacuate and prepare Earth for the war that's coming," Shade said. "But if they can, if humans can access even a fraction of Inheritor capabilities, it changes everything." The briefing was interrupted by alarms screaming across the command center. A communications officer called out, "Majesty, massive krill assault forming on the western perimeter. They're concentrating forces near the human defensive positions." "Of course they are," Marcus muttered. He pulled up tactical displays showing his unit's location. Chen and the others were dug in at a fortified position that suddenly looked very fragile against the krill numbers building outside. Shade was already moving, issuing orders with calm authority. "Mobilize the Crimson Guard, all defensive forces to combat stations, and get me a transport. I'm going to the front personally." "Majesty, that's not advisable," one of her advisors protested. If the inheritor theory is correct, you'll be exposing yourself to exactly what my soldiers face daily. Shade cut him off. Prepare my armor. Marcus grabbed his gear, the scar on his torso pulling but not limiting his movement. I'm coming with you. You're still recovering, Vorn protested, and I'm healing faster than anyone can explain. My people are out there, and if the Krill are coming for inheritors, they're coming for me specifically. Marcus checked his rifle, the familiar weight grounding him. Besides, I want to test a theory too. The transport to the western perimeter was tense and quiet. Marcus sat beside Crimson Guard warriors who treated him with a respect that felt unearned. Shade sat across from him, her ceremonial armor replaced with combat gear that looked both functional and impossibly elegant. You don't have to prove anything, she said quietly. I have to prove I'm not going to get my people killed because ancient aliens decided to use human DNA as storage space, Marcus replied. And I need to know if this healing thing is permanent or if I just got lucky once. It's permanent, Vorn's voice came through their comms. He was monitoring from the command center. Your genetic markers are stable and active. The flame constant is now part of your baseline biology. Great, I'm a living science experiment. You're a adapting to new capabilities, Shade corrected. Use them. The battlefield was worse than the tactical displays suggested. Krill warriors were hitting human positions with focused intensity, ignoring easier targets to concentrate on the fortified bunker where Chen's forces had dug in. Marcus could see the pattern immediately. This wasn't a tactical assault, it was extermination. They're not trying to break our lines, Kess observed, her enhanced optics tracking Krill movements. They're trying to kill every human before moving on. Vorn, how many humans in my unit show inheritor markers? Marcus asked through comms. 3 definite matches, 5 possibles, but the markers are dormant, Sergeant. They haven't activated. Then let's wake them up. Marcus jumped from the transport before it fully landed, hitting the ground at a run. His body responded with efficiency that felt foreign and natural simultaneously. Faster reflexes, enhanced strength. The wound in his torso just a distant ache that his biology was ignoring in favor of combat effectiveness. He reached Chen's position and found his lieutenant coordinating fire with the kind of calm professionalism that made him a good officer. Webb, what are you doing here? Medical said you were critical. Medical doesn't understand human biology apparently, Marcus cut him off. Listen, I need you to trust me. Those soldiers you flagged for genetic screening, Reynolds, Torres, Park. Get them to the front line. They're support positions, not front line rated. They will be, trust me. The Krill were coming over the defensive barriers now, their chittering filling the air with horror movie sound effects. Marcus opened fire, and his accuracy was impossible, every shot connecting, his enhanced reflexes tracking targets faster than conscious thought could process. Reynolds came up beside him, a young private from Chicago who looked terrified and determined. Sergeant, what's happening? Why am I being pulled to front line? Because you're about to discover you're tougher than you think, Marcus said. And when things get bad, and they will, don't fight it. Let your body do what it needs to do. A Krill warrior broke through, mandibles aimed for Reynolds' throat. Marcus tackled the private out of the way, but not before the Krill's blade caught Reynolds across the shoulder, a deep cut that should have sent him into shock. Instead, Reynolds screamed, and his eyes went wide with something that looked like recognition. The wound began closing immediately, the flame constant activating under mortal threat, and when Reynolds looked at Marcus, there was understanding there. What the hell? Later, right now, fight. And Reynolds did. The young private moved with enhanced speed, his body responding to capabilities it hadn't known it possessed, and Marcus saw the moment understanding clicked. This was always here, just waiting. Torres and Park activated within minutes, both responding to injuries that triggered their dormant genetics. The 3 of them fought with a ferocity that pushed back the Krill assault, and Marcus felt something like pride watching them discover what they could become. Shade arrived with her Crimson Guard, and together they broke the Krill offensive. The enemy withdrew not in retreat, but in what looked like tactical reassessment. They'd come to exterminate weak humans and found something else entirely. In the aftermath, covered in blood and combat residue, Marcus found Shade standing among the casualties, her expression unreadable. 4 activated, she said quietly. 4 humans discovered their Inheritor legacy today. And they're still alive, Marcus added. Still human, not ancient monsters, just soldiers who heal fast and fight harder. For now, Shade replied. But we don't know what happens as the flame constant strengthens. The Inheritors were legendary not just for their combat prowess, but for their unpredictability, their capacity for both salvation and destruction. Marcus looked at his hands, still steady despite everything. Then I guess we figure it out together. Because running isn't an option, and neither is letting the Krill win. Shade extended her hand, and when Marcus took it, her grip was firm and equal. Then we prepare for war, Sergeant Webb. And we hope humanity's Inheritor blood makes you heroes, rather than the nightmares the prophecy warned about. No pressure, Marcus said. No pressure at all, Shade agreed and almost smiled. Just the fate of multiple species hanging in the balance. Marcus laughed despite everything, because ancient warrior DNA or not, he was still just a guy from Cleveland trying not to get everyone killed. He just had better healing now, and possibly the fate of the galaxy accidentally resting on his genetically modified shoulders. 3 weeks after the Inheritor revelation, Marcus stood in Earth's Expeditionary Command briefing room, facing generals and politicians who looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Behind him, holographic displays showed footage of human soldiers fighting with enhanced capabilities that had military analysts creating entirely new tactical frameworks. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," General Morrison said, his expression somewhere between disbelief and barely contained excitement. "Our species is descended from ancient alien warriors, and combat stress activates superhuman healing and enhanced combat effectiveness." "That's the simplified version, sir," Marcus confirmed. "The detailed version involves a lot of genetic markers I don't understand in prophecies from 15,000 years ago. And the Krill are specifically targeting humans, because they evolved to exterminate these Inheritors." "Also correct." Morrison sat back in his chair. "Hell of a first contact situation, Sergeant." "It gets better, sir," Marcus said, pulling up casualty reports. "Since the first activations on Talvo 7, we've documented 43 human soldiers showing Inheritor traits. All of them activated under extreme combat stress. The Valorians are calling it the awakening." "How many soldiers are we talking about?" a civilian advisor asked nervously. "How many humans carry these genes?" "Preliminary screening suggests approximately 30% of the human population carries dormant Inheritor markers." Vorn's voice came through the comm link from Valorian space. "But activation requires specific conditions: mortal threat, extreme stress, combat environment. It's not something that spontaneously occurs during civilian life." "So 30% of humanity are potential super soldiers," Morrison said slowly. "And our enemy is specifically evolved to kill them." "That's one way to look at it, sir." Marcus pulled up tactical projections. "The other way is that 30% of humanity just became the galaxy's best defense against the Krill. The Valorian Empire has been losing this war for 5 years. Since humans started activating, we've held 3 major defensive lines that were about to collapse." The briefing room erupted in debate. Ethical concerns about weaponizing genetic traits, questions about long-term effects, political implications of humanity being ancient warrior descendants. Marcus let them argue while studying the casualty reports that showed a different story. Humans were surviving encounters that should have killed them, adapting to combat faster than any training could explain. His personal comm buzzed with an encrypted message from Shade. "How is the political circus?" Marcus typed back. "About as fun as being stabbed. How's your end?" The Valorian Council is debating whether to treat humanity as saviors or potential threats. Vorn keeps quoting prophecies. "I'm developing a headache." Marcus smiled despite everything. Over the past weeks, he developed an unexpected partnership with the Empress. Not quite friendship because she was royalty and he was enlisted, but something beyond just military cooperation. She understood the weight of impossible choices, and he was learning that leading from the front mattered more than formal authority. "Welcome to my world," he sent back. "Want to trade?" Her response came quickly. "No, I quite like being Empress. You handle the political circus." The debate was interrupted by alarms, not the briefing room systems but Marcus's personal tactical alert. Krill movements detected in the outer colonies, multiple targets, massive force concentration. "Sir, we've got incoming," Marcus said, pulling up the tactical feed. "Krill forces moving toward Valorian defensive positions at Cavish Station. Current estimates." He stopped, checking the numbers again. Current estimates put it at the largest Krill fleet movement in recorded history. Morrison was already moving, issuing orders. "All Earth forces to battle stations. Contact the Valorian fleet, coordinate defensive response." "Webb, you're with me." The defense of Cavish Station became the crucible that would define humanity's role in the galactic war. The Krill came in numbers that darkened space, their bioships bristling with organic weapons that had destroyed entire fleets. But this time, human soldiers stood alongside Valorian forces, and when the first wave hit, something fundamental changed. Marcus felt it the moment the Krill closed to combat range, a burning in his blood that was becoming familiar, the flame constant responding to mortal threat. But this time it was stronger, spreading through his entire unit as dormant inheritors awakened simultaneously. Reynolds, Torres, Park, and dozens of others activated in a cascade effect, their genetics responding to both the threat and proximity to each other. "Webb, your vitals are spiking." Vorn's voice came through the medical monitoring system. "All activated humans showing elevated metabolic function, enhanced neural activity. You're all synchronizing." Marcus didn't need medical scans to know it. He could feel the others, a connection like the bonds Valorian warriors described in their battle meditation. Human soldiers moving with coordinated precision that no training could have produced, their inheritor blood recognizing each other across the battlefield. The Krill came expecting to exterminate weak humans. Instead, they found warriors who could absorb injuries that would kill any other species, adapt to combat in real time, and fight with a ferocity that the ancient inheritors would have recognized. Marcus led his squad through breach points that should have been death sentences, healing through wounds that should have ended fights, moving with enhanced speed that made Krill targeting systems struggle. But he wasn't unstoppable or invincible. He was just harder to kill and learning fast. Shade appeared on the battlefield in her Crimson Guard armor, fighting alongside human soldiers with the kind of trust that transcended species. When a Krill blade found her blind spot, Marcus was there, taking the hit meant for her and feeling the flame constant burn it away before the injury could be fatal. "You're making it very difficult to maintain proper royal distance, Sergeant," Shade said, back to back with him as Krill warriors pressed in. "Sorry, Majesty. The ancient warrior genes keep overriding military protocol." "I've noticed." She glanced at him, silver eyes bright with something between exasperation and respect. "Don't die proving you're unkillable. That would be disappointingly ironic." "Noted." The battle raged for 6 hours, and by the end, the Krill withdrew not because they'd won, but because human soldiers refused to die on schedule. Cavish Station held, and for the first time in 5 years, the Valorian Empire had successfully repelled a major Krill offensive. In the aftermath, Marcus found Shade in the command center, coordinating recovery efforts while looking like she'd fought for 6 days rather than 6 hours. He handed her a coffee substitute that Valorians used and that humans had learned to tolerate. "We held," she said quietly. "We did. Your people took 60% casualties, but they're already healing. Half of them will be combat-ready within days." Marcus thought about Reynolds, recovering from injuries that should have cost him his legs. About Tors, who'd taken a krill blade through the chest and was already joking about it. About Park, who'd lost an arm and was already growing it back with regeneration that medical science couldn't explain. 30% of humanity carries these genes, Marcus said. That's over 2 billion potential soldiers. 2 billion humans who can heal from almost anything and fight harder the more threatened they become. "That terrifies people," Shade replied. "My advisors, your generals, everyone watching this unfold. They see humanity transforming from a support species into something that could challenge empires. Are you terrified?" Shade considered the question carefully. "I'm cautious. The prophecy warned that the Inheritor's return could save the galaxy or doom it. Your species is unpredictable, aggressive, and now nearly impossible to kill. That combination makes you either the greatest allies or the worst enemies. And which do you think we are?" "I think," Shade said slowly, "that humanity is figuring out who you are in real time. And I think the choice isn't determined by genetics but by what you do with these capabilities. The Inheritors fell because they became arrogant, believed they were invincible. You can be better." Marcus looked at his hands, at the scars that were already fading as the flame constant did its work. "I'm still just a guy from Cleveland. These genes don't change that. They just make me harder to kill while I'm figuring things out." "That's what gives me hope," Shade said. "You're not acting like ancient warriors returned. You're acting like soldiers doing a job. That's the difference between being heroes and becoming the monsters the prophecy feared." Over the next months, humanity's role in the galactic war transformed. Earth began training Inheritor-capable soldiers, but with emphasis on discipline, ethics, and the understanding that enhanced healing didn't make them invincible or right. Human forces integrated with Valorian fleets, and together they held defensive lines that had been collapsing for years. The Krill adapted, developing new tactics to counter Inheritor healing. But humanity adapted faster, the unpredictability Shade had mentioned becoming a strategic advantage rather than a liability. Marcus found himself leading joint operations, his impossible survival making him a symbol of humanity's new role. But he made sure other voices were heard. Reynolds planning tactics, Tors developing training protocols, Park working with Valorian medical teams to understand the flame constant's limits. A year after the first activation, Marcus stood on Cavish Station's observation deck with Shade, watching supply ships arrive from both Earth and Valorian space. The war continued, but the desperate retreat had become something else, determined resistance. "The Council officially recognized humanity as full military partners today," Shade said. "Equal status with any major galactic power. That's political speak for, we're too useful to marginalize and too dangerous to ignore," Marcus translated. "Essentially," she smiled slightly, "you've become rather good at politics for someone who claims to be just a soldier. I've had a good teacher." Marcus gestured at the stars. "The Krill are still out there. They're not going to stop trying to exterminate humans just because we've gotten harder to kill." "No," Shade agreed. "But now they face an enemy their evolutionary programming didn't prepare them for, Inheritors who learned from the past, who fight not for conquest but for survival. Unpredictable, yes, but also principled." Marcus thought about the prophecy, about ancient warriors returning to face the galaxy's greatest threat. "Do you think we're what the Inheritors intended? Humans with their blood fighting their old enemy?" "I think," Shade said carefully, "that the Inheritors left genetic markers in dozens of species across the galaxy. But humans are the ones who activated first, who faced extinction and adapted instead of running. That wasn't predetermined, that was choice. Humanity's greatest talent," Marcus said, making the best of impossible situations. And surviving what should kill you, Shade added. Don't forget that part. Never. Marcus looked at his reflection in the observation window. Same face as the guy from Cleveland who joined up for college money, but carrying weight that changed everything. We're not the inheritors returned. We're something new. Something they didn't plan for. Which makes you either more dangerous or more valuable, Shade observed. Time will tell which. No pressure, Marcus said. Shade's laugh was genuine, unguarded. No pressure at all. Just the continuation of the war, humanity's place in the galaxy, and the question of whether you'll become saviors or the monsters the prophecy warned about. Well, Marcus said, when you put it that way, it sounds really dramatic. It is dramatic, Sergeant. You're living in the moment that will define your species' future. Marcus thought about Reynolds coordinating with Valorian commanders, about Torres training new awakened soldiers with emphasis on discipline over power, about Park's research that was helping both species understand inheritor biology. He thought about all the impossible things humans had accomplished by refusing to accept impossible. Then I guess we'd better not screw it up, he said. Shade raised her coffee substitute in a mock toast. To not screwing it up. To being unpredictable but principled. To humanity, Shade added, and to whatever the hell you're going to become. They stood together watching the stars, representatives of two